I am going to give you guys an opportunity to make some cash because Chris Brockman told me, oh, I'm going to set you up with this gambling segment. It's going to be great. I'm going to give you insider information.
Yeah, I gave you some games.
I said, thanks, Chris. And I immediately called Hammering Hank Goldberg because 20 years ago, as a kid at ESPN, I produced his gambling segment for 2 years in a row. And at the end, he sent me Joe's Stone Crabs. So, there we sat in Bristol, Connecticut, which, by the way, not good. We sat in Bristol, Connecticut, and we would crack stone crabs after a SportsCenter show twice a year. It was very exciting, and it was a great reason to produce Hank's gambling segment because let me just tell you this right now. I don't know anything about points, numbers, spreads, numbers. I don't do fantasy. It's not fun for me. But Hank does, and I want to make you some money. So stick around because if you want to make some cash, listen up to the Rich Eisen Show. Is that a good way to bring Rick Neuheisel in to talk about the weekend? Hey, Rick, do you want to make some cold, hard cash? Stick
no better
around.
way, Suze. No better way.
I think so.
I would trust anything you had to say.
I love it when you say things like that, Rick. So,
I miss you. I remember when we were a team. What happened? I got kicked to the curb.
I don't know. You went to CBS. You left me behind. Do I need to go blonder? Is that the deal? Do I need to start wearing a cocktail dress to do sports reports? I just need to know.
You are absolutely perfect just the way you are, as Rich tells everybody.
God,
That's what he wanted me to share with you.
I love talking about how great I am on television. Thank you for that. Hey, you can now have a chance to tell me how wrong I am because Eric Davis did tell me that I was dead wrong about Lamar Jackson. Do you also believe that he's got a solid chance still at the Heisman?
Oh, I think he's still the leader, but he's certainly, and I don't blame Lamar Jackson for getting sacked 11 times last night. I don't blame Lamar Jackson for 15 penalties. But he's the quarterback of the team, and it was a big stage, and it didn't go well. So for that, even though his numbers are still Cam Newton-like in comparison to the other Heisman quarterbacks that we've enjoyed, I think he has opened the door for a J.T. Barrett, for a Jalen Hurts, for maybe even in a year where things are topsy-turvy a little bit, maybe even for one of those quarterbacks in Washington, because both Jake Browning and the Washington State quarterback, Luke Falk, have big stages here to finish the season. So who knows what will happen.
Donnell Pumphrey, too, in San Diego State. He's got that situation where people aren't watching his games, and he may not play big names, but I think Marshall Faulk would tell you he can relate to being in the Heisman race and no one's seeing him play.
Well, that's a fact. Donnell Pumphrey, I think, probably gets an invite to New York City, but in terms of his chance to actually win it, it would take a remarkable chain of events that put him on a center stage, and that's just not going to happen. This week, San Diego State plays in Laramie, Wyoming. They've already clinched their half of the Mountain West Conference, so they'll get a big stage, probably playing either a Wyoming. But if they knock off Wyoming tonight, it probably ends up being Boise State, which would be one of those games that everybody will watch. And maybe he gets I think he gets the invite. I don't think he can win.
Rick Neuheisel, Susie Schuster here on The Rich Eisen Show. Watching Bobby Petrino last night, even at the half going into the locker room, obviously trickeration on the Houston part and obviously shocking some of the guys, but pre-snap penalties, a fight breaking out on the sidelines. What were you thinking when you watched this game unfold?
I think, first of all, you have to give a lot of credit to Tom Herman and the Houston Cougars. They were outstanding. That defensive lineman, Ed Oliver, is a surefire first-rounder. He was spectacular. Greg Ward, in my mind, was Lamar Jackson before Lamar Jackson. But what I really came away from the coaching side of me is it was kind of unfair to have that game with that kind of importance on it with a 5-day rest. I know both teams had it, but when you only have two to 3 days to get a plan in, you're at the end of the season where your team is kind of beat up anyway, and you have to travel from Louisville to Houston to play the game. You got a lot of time to get X's and O's in, but you don't have much time to get the psychology down of the game. And I think that's where Bobby Petrino's kicking himself. I think they probably worried too much about X's and O's and not nearly enough about getting that team prepared to play in an environment that was going to be every bit as challenging as playing at Clemson. And I don't think that team believed it, and I think they're still shocked that that was the case.
Yeah, I think that Tom Herman had more planned for Petrino than he was ready, I guess, to deal with. And maybe it was a surprise game. I mean, Tom Herman's got a great pedigree, and he's a guy that could have given up any million of times. And I think he's going to be probably talked about and bandied about for a lot of the big coaching jobs out there this year.
Well, there's no question that if there's a job that he wants, that he'll be the number one candidate. I just don't know that many big jobs open. Susie, I think LSU probably stays with Ed Orgeron, especially if they win the next 2 weeks. It's all right. Now's the expectation. They've got to beat up Florida team tomorrow, and then they play on Thanksgiving Day at Texas A&M, and the Aggies have all but imploded. So those 2 games are winnable. That keeps Ed there. Money's not exactly plentiful in the state of Louisiana. That makes economic sense. We'll wait and see what happens at Texas. But I'm of the mind that the people in charge of Texas, maybe not the big money guys, but the people in charge say that 3 years is not enough, and Charlie deserves 1 more year given the youth of the team, and I'm probably in agreement with that. So if that job stays status quo, we're all assuming that they'll beat Kansas and get to postseason, regardless of the game against TCU next week. So which jobs come open? Does he leave to go to Oregon if Mark Helfrich gets shown the door? I don't know that Oregon's where he wants to live. I think he's probably sitting right where he is. He loves Houston. He likes the Texas recruiting market. And he's going to wait and see what happens at Texas and Texas A&M here in the next few years and be very happy making his $3 million at Houston.
$3 million at Houston. When I read that, I was thinking to myself, wow, I had no idea that he made that much money. Susie Schuster, Rick Neuheisel here on The Rich Eisen Show. And Tom Herman does have a history at Texas because he was a graduate assistant there. So it would make sense. Let me ask you about this, because I would be reticent on The Rich Eisen Show not to ask you about your thoughts on the Michigan-Indiana game, because I think that one host of this show is, shall we say, nervous about John O'Korn stepping in. But it's not like we're getting some unexperienced kid in John O'Korn.
What's interesting is that Michigan, since Jim Harbaugh arrived, and it's whether or not Jim Harbaugh has planned for this or he invites this, but they've kind of been wearing the black hats around the country because it's Jim taking his team to Florida for spring break. It's Jim that's going out satellite camping with seemingly an endless bound of energy. It's Jim that's sleeping over with recruits. It's Jim doing all the things, and it's astounding the success that he's achieved in the short amount of time he's been the head coach at Michigan. But right now, I think it's the first time that Jim Harbaugh is actually the favorite of everybody else in the country, because if Michigan can win against Indiana and then next week against Ohio State, Michigan will make sure that only one team from the Big Ten gets to the college football playoff. By virtue of them being in the Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin or possibly Minnesota, but I think we all expect Wisconsin. If by virtue of that winner would go and the loser, no other team would be part of it. So I think for the other conferences around the country looking for a slot, they're all pulling for the maize and blue.
Rick Neuheisel, Susie Schuster on The Rich Eisen Show. I still wonder if the Jabril Peppers surprise isn't being played well enough. Like when he comes on, you're kind of, I feel like you're expecting, you know it's coming. It's going to be a decoy. Right. It's going to be something. How can Harbaugh use him more effectively?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. He's going to be Danny Decoy. Mm-hmm. I mean, you put him in there and he attracts attention. It's like the magician and trying to get your eyes one place where he's really making a move somewhere else. It gives Chesson and Darbo and those guys one-on-one coverage somewhere. And when that happens, usually good things are happening. The reason they lost last week, other than a great effort by Iowa, was the 50-50 balls didn't come down 50-50. They fell all towards Iowa.
Right.
And when that happens, when you're building an offense without a dual-threat quarterback, without using the quarterback as a run threat, you've got to win 50-50 balls. Or you have to be able to run effectively. Iowa did a great job stopping the run, which meant they were one-on-one outside, but they didn't make any plays down the field. So if Spate is unavailable, which is what everybody thinks is the case, then it's up to John O'Korn. But for Michigan fans, they'll take heart in that O'Korn did throw 30 touchdown passes one year while the quarterback at the University of Houston.
Mm-hmm. What's your team for your upset special this week? And if we look at the top 8, I'm curious about where you think the surprise could come. Or are there any?
Goodness. I think Wake Forest and Clemson. Mm-hmm. Clemson, everybody just thinks that was a hiccup. That was 70 passes. They're 88th in the country in rushing the football. We remember Wayne Gallman from a year ago as a 1,500-yard back. He's nowhere close to that. Deshaun Watson last week had 5 carries for 8 yards. He was a 100-yard guy in the big games a year ago. So it wasn't an accident that Pittsburgh was in that game and eventually won it. And Wake Forest, they're already bowl eligible. Dave Clawson has got a great defense. This is a great trivia question for you. Name a team that in a 15-game span in the last 5 years, in the 15-game span, won 3 of them by scoring less than 10 points. That's Wake Forest. That's the kind of defense they won a 3-0 game, they won a 7-3 game, and they won a 9-7 game. So they have found ways to win with defense, and if they can corral the rush game again and make Deshaun Watson a one-trick pony, then there's an upset potential there.
Anybody who covers college football, Rick Neuheisel, Susie Schuster in for Rich Eisen, anybody who covers college football knows not to look past a Wake or an Iowa, because those are the games that surprise you.
Right.
And anybody who does, I mean, again, I had so many upsets. I had an upset at Wake. I mean, you have to be prepared for anything, I think, in college football, almost more than pro football, don't you think?
No, there's no question about it. There's so much variety in the way offenses play. There's so much unknown in terms of depth charts, guys you didn't know about that all of a sudden flash onto the scene and become stars. How about Shea Patterson last week, the quarterback who hadn't played a down at Ole Miss? He take his red shirt off in College Station. He's down 21-6 and throws for over 340 yards and 3 touchdowns in the second half. And they come back. It was a lost season for the Rebels. They went 29-28. But that's what makes college football the best.
Brockman, what do you got?
Hey, Rick. It's Alabama's year, it seems, this year. And everyone talks about if a team is going to knock them off, they need to have a quarterback who can get outside the pocket and kind of give them trouble. Now that Louisville is basically out of the mix, can Ohio State be that team, or is it Alabama's season to take home another title?
Well, we don't have to look back very long to see that Ohio State did beat Alabama. It was the first ever college football playoff game. They had Cardell Jones at quarterback, but he at least posed enough of a run threat to give Zeke Elliott an extra gap to run through, and he went through those gaps for over 200 yards. So, yeah, it's possible. I don't necessarily think it has to be a dual-threat quarterback, but that certainly would help. But here's the deal. How exciting would college football be this year with the Final Four if Alabama just went off and went to the NFL? Mm-hmm. I mean, they're practicing with NFL guys. This is a program that is just beyond in terms of what they've done, what they've found ways to do. How they've built this machine. Their defense is as good as ever. And I'm not belittling the effort of Nick Saban or looking down my nose. I'm congratulating him. He's clearly the king of college football.
Hey, Rick, you mentioned something interesting there about Alabama and NFL. I saw this USC had some former players that were in the NFL or got cut and didn't make it come back and practice. We saw Marshawn Lynch with Cal play scout team running back recently this year. Do you think that at some point that a rule will come into place where this isn't really fair to be able to do this for college teams? Or what's your philosophy on this? Because I was a little surprised that this is allowed to happen. Guys that aren't on your team or former players that have graduated are allowed to come back and be live bodies in practice.
I just saw this question posed to Urban Meyer in a press conference, and he had no idea what was going on. He was asking more questions. Then he pulled out his phone and started thinking of guys he could call.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth of the matter is, give Nick Saban all the credit in the world for finding the loophole. There's no question that it's illegal. You can do it as long as you don't publicize it in advance of the participation. But I do expect that there'll be some measure of legislation that goes forward, because it certainly favors those teams that have those kind of players. And I think that it will get voted out as a rule. But until then, give credit where credit's due. Nick Saban's done it again.
Nick Saban's done it again. We'll see if he'll do it again in a couple months. But Rick Neuheisel, thanks as always. Miss you and your guitar. Come on into the studio.
Susie, you tell that husband of yours to go maize and blue, all right?
Oh, God, he's in a panic. He's in a, you guys, I'm not joking. He's going to take one of those fuzzy blankets and curl up on the sofa. He's in a panic. All right, should I tell him you feel good about this weekend, Rick?
Feel good, yeah.
All right.
Indiana can win next week and still get to a bowl game. It'll be okay.
Rick, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.